Is there a trick to fast track new learning? Yes, there is.
Acquisition means picking up a language, subconsciously absorbing the language, having a feel for it.
So there's a myth when it comes to language. And that myth is that children are exceptionally good at learning languages and that we lose that gift. There's a myth when it comes to language. And that myth is that children are exceptionally good at learning languages and that we lose that gift when we grow up. And we have good reason for believing in this myth. Many of us have had this experience. We've picked a language in high school or college, studied hard for 3, 4, 5 years, and then we take a trip to France. And we meet a 5-year-old French child, and she speaks way better French than we do. And it's not fair. I mean, we have struggled so hard, and she has never worked a day in her life, and yet here she is correcting our grammar. And you're right. It's not fair. It's not fair because you're comparing yourself to a child who has had 15,000 hours of French exposure, and you have had 100, maybe 200, maybe 50. It depends upon how much of your classes were actually spent in French instead of in English talking about French. When you make the fair comparison, you take a 5-year-old child, transplant them to Spain, give them 500 hours of exposure there. Adult gets a job in Spain, 500 hours of exposure. What you'll find is that the adult beats the child every time. We are better at learning languages than children.
Acquisition and learning, I get the credit for both of these terms, but I didn't really invent them. Acquisition and learning was kind of an informal use. Wallace Lambert of Canada used it. Acquisition means picking up a language, subconsciously absorbing the language, having a feel for it. Learning means what we did in school, knowing the rules, being able to consciously remember what they are, talk about them, etc. And the big breakthrough is that they're different, and that acquisition is much more powerful than learning, which came as a big shock to me because I love grammar.
So how do babies learn? Well, we know for a fact that babies don't learn language. They acquire language. Babies acquire language naturally, subconsciously, spontaneously, without even thinking about it. They acquire language through what's called comprehensible input. Some of the problems that I see with traditional teaching methods. I used to be a traditional teacher. I started 25 years ago at Locke High School in Los Angeles, wonderful school. I was a traditional teacher for about 2 years, and then I changed. So this is another quote that I love is from a man named Bill Van Patten. Bill Van Patten is a linguist or a linguist instructor, language instructor. He's written several wonderful books on input. So this is one of my favorite quotes from Bill Van Patten. Languages are too complex and abstract to be taught using traditional teaching methods. Languages, they're just too abstract, just too complex. We can't use traditional teaching methods to teach languages. Language is just too abstract. It's just too complex. Too much output, and not nearly enough input. Output is forced. We're doing a lot of forced output. We're doing too much forced output. I've seen a lot of forced output where instructors are doing half the talking. The instructors are doing half the talking, and the students are doing half the talking in a level 1 class. In my opinion, that's too much. The instructor needs to do about 80-90% output in a level 1 class. I would say about 70% output in a year 2 class. So these things are input. We all know these things are input. Things are input, listening and reading. That's it. There's no other input out there. No other input. These things are not input. Not input. Homework, speaking, reading, writing, repeating, grammar section, memorization. None of these are input, especially speaking. Speaking is not input. Speaking is fun. I have my students speak every day. I have my students get in groups of 2 and speak. Is it a waste of time? Not really. Is it input? No. Are they having fun? Sure they are. They're there to speak the language. Reading is so super powerful. I've got another quote by Krashen. Picking up word meaning by reading is 10 times faster than intensive vocabulary instruction. I'm going to read that again because it's so important. Picking up word meaning by reading is 10 times faster than intensive vocabulary instruction. In my class, we read every day. In all of my classes, Spanish 1, Spanish 3, Spanish 4, we read every single day. In Spanish 1, we read the last 10 minutes of class. In Spanish 3 and 4, we read the first 10 minutes and the last 10 minutes. We do free voluntary reading, and for my Spanish 1 students, I bring the reading for them. Okay, we read every single day. So the best reading is free and voluntary. There's been lots of research done that says for reading to work, it has to be free and voluntary. If you quiz them on it, if you have them do a book report on it, if you talk to them about it later, it doesn't work as well. Nothing should be attached to it. So in my class, there's nothing attached.
State, psychophysiological state. If you're sad, angry, worried, upset, you're not going to learn, period. If you're happy, relaxed, in an alpha brain state, curious, you're going to learn really quickly. And very specifically, you need to be tolerant of ambiguity. If you're one of those people who needs to understand 100% every word you're hearing, you will go nuts because you'll be incredibly upset all the time because you're not perfect. If you're comfortable with getting some, not getting some, just paying attention to what you do understand, you're going to be fine, you'll be relaxed, and you'll be learning quickly. Listen a lot. I call it brain soaking. You put yourself in a context where you're hearing tons and tons and tons of the language, and it doesn't matter if you understand it or not. You're listening to the rhythms, you're listening to patterns that repeat, you're listening to things that stand out. So just soak your brain in this. Well, with every language, there's high-frequency content. In English, 1,000 words covers 85% of anything you're ever going to say in daily communication. 3,000 words gives you 98% of anything you're going to say in daily conversation. You've got 3,000 words, you're speaking the language. The rest is icing on the cake.
The most important thing is to get things wrong, to make mistakes. And that is the first rule. Let me explain to you why. See, when we know languages, we know a whole collection of sounds and a whole collection of structures, which combined make what I like to call, and for the purpose of this presentation, our language database. And our language database will contain all the sounds and structures that we know. However, there's a whole family of sounds and structures that are beyond our database. And for us to be able to embark on those and to be able to explore those, there's nothing within our database, nothing within our knowledge that will tell us when we're getting these structures right. Nothing to tell us when that sound is precise. Let's say we're going to explore this one specific sound. There is nothing in our database. When we're saying it, we could say it perfectly, but in our minds, it will sound like a mistake. So you know that queasy feeling that we feel, that insecure thing when we feel like we're doing something wrong? That is the trigger that you need to look for, because that is a signal that tells you that you're going beyond your database and that you're allowing yourself to explore the realm of a new language. Let me show you how this works in practice. So let's say we're going to go and learn the word door in Spanish. So the word door in Spanish is puerta. So for puerta, we've got a few sounds that exist in English, so the pu, e, and the ta. However, when it comes to the r, that sound is not in our database. The rrr, the rolled r, does not exist in the English sound database. And it's a little bit on the outside. So if we allowed ourselves to bridge through our database and to really break through and to make the mistake, we could make sounds like the rrr. But instead, what sometimes happens is that we get the closest relative of it that is within the database, and that is the r sound. And that r sound makes something that sounds like puerta, which doesn't mean a thing in Spanish. It actually doesn't sound too charming, and it doesn't tell you too much. So for the first technique, allow yourself to make that mistake so that sounds like puerta can come out.